You know this feeling. It comes to you in the quiet hours, when the house has finally gone still and you are left alone with the soft hum of your own tired breath. It isn't a loud pain. It doesn't shout. It settles over you like dusk, slow, familiar, dimming the edges of things you used to hold with certainty. A kind of fading light. For years, you've been the one who answers the late-night phone call, the one who keeps the door unlocked, just in case someone needs you. You stand in your own kitchen at midnight, staring at a cup you never meant to drink, trying to gather yourself after giving away the last pieces of your strength. And there is that quiet thought you never say out loud. Why does everyone come to me only when they want something? You feel the truth of it in your body, the heaviness in your shoulders, the breath that doesn't quite reach the bottom of your lungs, a kind of lifelong leaning forward, always ready, always responsible, always bracing for the next request that will pull you away from yourself. It's strange, isn't it? How you learn to carry people the way some carry firewood, stacking their needs against your chest, adjusting your balance, pretending the weight is fine because you've always been strong enough to manage just a little more. But strength turns into silence when no one asks how much it costs you. There were evenings when you sat at the edge of your bed, shoes still on, replaying another conversation where you listened and soothed and steadied someone who never once wondered what kind of day you had. And afterward, when the phone finally went dark, there was that familiar emptiness, like a room that's been walked through too many times, its warmth carried off by other people's footsteps. You tell yourself it's kindness. You tell yourself it's love. You tell yourself this is simply who you are. But there is a moment, small, almost imperceptible, when your hands loosen around the weight you've been holding. When you notice the quiet they leave behind. And in that quiet, something inside you whispers a truth you've ignored for years. You cannot keep pouring from a well no one sees. You begin to see something tender and difficult about your own generosity. Not the surface version you show the world, but the deeper current that's been flowing underneath for years. We like to tell ourselves we give because it's right, because it's kind, because we were raised to look after others. And that's true, on the surface. But beneath it, there is a quieter story we rarely admit, even to ourselves. Some part of you learned long ago that love is earned, that being needed is safer than being seen, that if you stay useful, you won't be forgotten. So you carry and soothe and fix, not out of pure selflessness, but out of a small, persistent fear that if you stop, the room will empty and no one will notice the space you leave behind. We don't talk about this fear because it feels embarrassing, childish even, like something we should have outgrown. But the truth is simpler and far less dramatic. You overgive because you're afraid of disappearing. There's a moment that comes back to you sometimes, a memory of calling someone late in the evening, not for help, not for rescue, just to hear a steady voice. And they didn't answer. They didn't call back. And the next day, when they finally did, they spoke as if nothing had happened, as if you hadn't been sitting in the dark holding your breath. You told them you were fine. You always do. Or that other day, when someone mentioned something broken in their life, a plan, a relationship, a small domestic disaster, and before they even finished the sentence, you were already picturing how to fix it. They didn't ask you to. They didn't need you to. But the old instinct rose up anyway, automatic as blinking. And afterward, you wondered quietly why you jumped in so quickly, why it felt dangerous not to. Because there is an invisible contract at play, isn't there? If you are endlessly helpful, you will not be left. If you never need anything, you will not be disappointed. If you make yourself small enough, no one will be threatened by your presence. But this contract was written in a moment of loneliness you barely remember, and you've been honoring it ever since, long after it stopped serving you, long after it began to drain you. And somewhere in you, a new realization is forming, soft and undeniable. What you called love was often the fear of being unseen. There comes a moment, quiet, almost private, when the truth steps forward. Not in a shout, not in a crisis, but in a soft shift inside you. As if a door you did not realize was closed has eased open, letting in a thin line of light. And in that light, you see something you've been avoiding for years. Your kindness has been thinning you out. You always thought giving made you good, that stretching yourself was noble, that pouring out more than you had was what love required. But now you see the cost, not in dramatic ways, but in the small accumulating absences. How your own needs have quietly slipped out the back door while you were tending to everyone else's fires. You notice how rarely you sit down without bracing for the next demand. How your hands, always opening toward others, have forgotten how to rest in your lap, empty and unneeded. There's an uneasiness in this recognition, a sadness, yes, and a strange relief, because something in you always knew that this pattern wasn't sustainable. A candle cannot burn in two directions and remain whole. You cannot keep lighting other people's paths while your own wick shortens unnoticed. It's not poetic. It's not tragic. It's simply the physics of being human. Think of a room you've tended for years. You sweep it. You keep it warm. You make sure others feel welcome in it. And slowly, without realizing it, you begin standing outside the door while everyone else enjoys the space you once called home. You hear the voices inside, the laughter, the comfort you created, and something inside you tightens, a quiet knowing that you've become the caretaker rather than the inhabitant. This is the turning point, when you recognize that goodness without boundaries is no longer goodness. It's self-erasure, a slow, polite disappearance. You're not angry. You're not blaming. You're simply seeing the truth with clearer eyes than before. And the truth has a way of rearranging the air, of making the room feel different, of reminding you that kindness was never meant to cost you your life. You stand there for a long moment, letting the realization settle the way dust settles after movement. Softly, unmistakably, everywhere. Even light must choose where it shines to stay alive. There comes a time when you stop announcing your limits, not out of spite, not out of bitterness, simply because something inside you has grown calm enough to stop explaining itself. You discover that you don't need a speech, or a moment of courage, or even permission. You only need the quiet certainty that rises when you finally choose peace over performance. Boundaries stop feeling like walls. They become thresholds, a gentle line between where your life ends and someone else's begins. You notice it first in small ways. A phone buzzing on the table, unanswered, not ignored, just allowed to ring itself into silence. The old impulse to rush, to fix, to soothe, flickers for a second and then fades, like a match burning out before it reaches your fingers. You sit in your own living room, hearing the wind move through the curtains, and for the first time in a long while, you don't brace for interruption. You let the moment hold you. You let your breath deepen. There is a dignity in that, a quiet refusal that needs no defense. People don't always understand this shift. They may interpret your silence as distance or indifference, but you know better. You feel the truth of it in your chest. Absence can be a form of love. Not the love that rescues or bends or sacrifices, but the love that refuses to harm itself for the sake of someone else's comfort. You're not shutting anyone out. You're simply no longer stepping past your own doorway without reason. There is a power in choosing not to answer every call, not to fix every crisis, not to offer yourself as the solution to problems you did not create. This is not punishment. It is preservation. It is the understanding that your energy is a finite thing, and it deserves the same tenderness you've given so freely to others. Silence becomes your anchor. It shields you from the noise of demands that once swallowed your days. It reminds you that you don't need to argue, prove, or justify the space you take. Your refusal does not need to be loud to be real. It only needs to be honest. You close the door gently, not to shut the world out, but to stay with yourself. And in that moment, the house quiets. There is a gentleness in stepping back that you didn't recognize at first. It felt like distance, like closing yourself off. But as the days passed, and you stopped rushing toward every voice that called your name, something inside you softened. You began to understand that silence is not the absence of love. It is how love breathes when it's tired. Imagine your life as a house you've lived in for decades, a small, warm place with worn floors and familiar light. For years, you've kept every door open, every lamp burning, every room ready for whoever wandered in needing warmth. You let their shadows stretch across your walls. You let their storms settle in your corners. You told yourself this was generosity, hospitality, devotion. But a house cannot shine for others if its own foundation quietly cracks. A lamp cannot burn for every traveller without dimming itself. So you begin closing certain doors, not with anger, not with finality, but with care. You leave a lantern in the hallway, its glow soft and steady, not to guide others in, but to remind yourself that you deserve your own light. You tend to this lantern the way you once tended to everyone else's troubles. You polish its glass, you guard its flame, you let it warm the air around you. This tending is an act of love, not the loud, self-sacrificing love you were taught to mirror, but a quieter, wiser form that understands limits. From this threshold, you can still feel for others. You can pray for their peace, hope for their healing, remember their stories, but you no longer let them drag their chaos through every room of your life. You meet them at the doorway, speak with kindness, and then let them travel on. It doesn't mean you've stopped caring. It means you've stopped abandoning yourself in the name of caring. The house becomes lighter, the lanterns glow steadier, and you discover a calm you hadn't felt in years. A gratitude that comes from finally belonging to yourself again. Silence in this new shape is not retreat. It is respect. It is choosing harmony over havoc, warmth over depletion, truth over performance. And you realize, with both humility and strength, stepping back can be the purest way to stay in love. There comes a point when the story no longer needs to be retold. You've traced the fatigue. You've seen the pattern. You've felt the moment when kindness turned into disappearance, when silence became a doorway instead of a punishment. And now something inside you loosens. Not quickly, not triumphantly, but the way a knot softens after years of being pulled too tight. You wake one morning and the world feels lighter in a way you can't quite explain. No grand shift, no sudden breakthrough. Just a quiet understanding that you don't have to hold what was never yours to carry. The guilt that clung to you for so long begins to slip off your shoulders, almost politely, as if it finally understands it has overstayed its welcome. You move through your home differently now, not as someone waiting for the next demand, but as someone returning to themselves after a long absence. The phone rings and you let it ring, not out of defiance, but out of peace. The old urgency is gone. The old panic too. There's no need to defend your silence, no need to prepare explanations that knot your stomach before they ever leave your mouth. You realize, with a kind of tender clarity, that explanation was the cage, not the boundary. What a relief it is to no longer narrate your choices to people who never listened. What freedom to feel the air settle around you without needing to justify your presence in it. You aren't angry. You aren't triumphant. You're simply done. Done contorting yourself into shapes that made other people comfortable. Done mistaking exhaustion for devotion. Done believing that love must cost you yourself. You step outside or open a window or simply breathe a little deeper, and the world doesn't collapse. No one storms the gates. No one drags you back into the old roles. Life keeps moving, and for the first time, you're moving with it, not behind it. There is an emptiness now, but it's spacious, not hollow, like a room finally cleared of noise, ready for whatever comes honestly. You understand at last that peace is not earned, it is claimed, and sometimes the truest freedom is simply not holding on.